This is the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast, and I'm your host, Courtney Young. If girlhood is a mindset, this is where we practice it out loud and unfiltered. We're healing, we're yapping, and we're doing it with spritzes in hand. Here's your permission slip to be soft, messy, and magnetic as hell. So grab a spritz, grab a seat, no small talk, just the real stuff. Welcome back to another episode of the Spritz Girl Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Young, and today we have a guest that I am really excited about. It's been a long time coming. She is an expert on all things wellness and hormones and birth control. I have been so excited to finally get to sit down with her. So I'm going to let her introduce herself for you, but please welcome my friend Taylor.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Taylor. I'm a registered dietitian and I own my own business, Nourished by Taylor. And I specialize in helping women safely transition off of hormonal birth control and safely heal their hormones naturally, whether it's PMS, mood swings, mood issues, whether it's irregular or missing a really painful, heavy period. All of that is my jam and truly inspired by my own personal negative experience coming off birth control and not being supported, not being educated in what my own body was needing or doing, and just really seeing that gap in care for women.
What is the real story behind Nourished by Taylor? Like, how did you start? How did it come to be?
So I was put on birth control at 18 years old. I'm now almost 34. I'll be 34 next month. I'm like, yeah, 34 next month. So I was put on birth control at 18 years old when I lost my period. And so my period was MIA for, several months. And so my mom took me to my doctor. Really, the only option was birth control. They basically were like, we'll take birth control. Your period will come back. It has no negative side effects. You can stay on that until you want to get pregnant. So a lot wrong with that I see now. And at the time, my mom and I were just like, okay, great. Like the magic pill, it will help me get my period back. A few weeks later, I started bleeding. We're like, great, good to go. So I was on that for a really long time, over a decade. And so fast forward 10 years, and I was listening to a random podcast by Alyssa Biddy, who's a world renowned women's health expert. She's written multiple books, including In the Flow and Woman Code. Highly recommend checking her out. And she was on this random podcast that I never listened to. I was driving across town to get burgers for takeout food on a random Friday. And I was like, I'm just going to choose a random podcast. And hers happened to be the one I chose. And she was talking all about the negative side effects of birth control. She specifically was talking about how you're not actually having a period on birth control. And here I was 27 at this time. I was a practicing dietitian, very aware of, or so I thought, health and was helping other people. I was working in eating disorders at the time, heal their relationship with food, because that's actually why I lost my period all those years ago, was an undiagnosed eating disorder. So it wraps around full circle. And I had no clue what was happening in my own body when I was 27 years old. And so I am a researcher. I'm a research nerd. So I went down this rabbit hole of learning all about women's health and hormones and birth control. And I was just continuously shocked at everything that I learned and how birth control doesn't not have any negative side effects. It has quite a few side effects, just like any medication. The fact that there was no informed consent of that, and I was just basically told, we'll take this for as long as you want until you want to get pregnant, was very misinformed, I believe. And so I made that personal decision to stop birth control. And for the next 4 years, I struggled really horribly with painful, saying acne. My period did come back, but it was anovulatory, meaning I wasn't actually ovulating, which that was something else I learned, is that you can ovulate without bleeding. You can not ovulate and bleed. It's very nuanced, which is why it's important to track that. And my anxiety was at an all-time high. And I've always been a perfectionist type A person, but when I stopped birth control, it was like a whole new level. And even, getting therapy and going on Lexapro, it like didn't make a dent. So when I kept going to my doctor or my dermatologist and I tried all the things, my acne was the most distressing thing because it was on my face and it was really embarrassing and affected my confidence. And I did spironolactone, I did antibiotics, I did restrictive diets, I did tretinoin, I did expensive facials, literally everything. And when I exhausted all my options, my dermatologist basically said, well, you just have to go back on birth control. And I remember sitting in the parking lot of the dermatologist's office, like literally crying because I felt so stuck. I knew at this point I had enough information to know birth control was making it worse. Birth control doesn't actually fix your skin or your period or anything else. It just masks the deeper symptom, and behind the scenes, it's like adding fuel to the fire and making it worse. And I didn't know what else to do. I felt very unsupported, very unsure, even as a dietitian. Again, I have a master's degree in nutrition, like probably one of the most qualified people who should know about their health. And I had no clue what to do. So that really inspired me. After I had my little cry session, I picked myself up and I was like, hey, I'm going to figure it out myself. So I again went back to the research and I pursued a certification in functional nutrition and learned all about functional testing, learned all about women's health, hormones, stuff, everything, and started basically healing myself and testing on myself and experimenting. And when I saw it worked, and I just saw so many other women who were experiencing the same thing, or they were just given birth control like candy of like, we'll just take this and it'll make it better. And I knew that deep down they weren't informed like I was. I felt like there was this gap that I needed to fill, and I felt like my passion was elsewhere. I made the leap to open my own business, and I opened Nourished by Taylor. And that's why my business is so niche, of helping women safely transition off of birth control. Because if I knew how to do that, I wouldn't have had to go through 4 years of post birth control syndrome, and I wouldn't have had to deal with that. And I don't want other women to have to deal with that as well.
Wow. What an incredibly, like, I have goosebumps. That is such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Hearing your story reminded me so much of my own, where I had never had sex before marriage. My husband and I went to go get married. I went into the gynecologist, and we got married when I was 24. So I was maybe 23 at the time. And my OBGYN, it was my first time ever going to one, was like, "Have you ever had sex?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Okay, well, then you don't need a pap smear then. And you just need to get on birth control." And I remember, being completely ill informed, not having done all of that research, being incredibly nervous of doctors in general, just kind of being like, okay. And then it wasn't until I started working with a coach and realizing that that birth control was making my PCOS symptoms so much worse. I will never forget a couple years later, finally getting up the courage to deciding to go back to an OBGYN and get my first pap smear, because I was told I didn't need one. All my friends are like, "Courtney, you need to go get a pap smear. Like, don't be crazy. You need to like take care of yourself." So I went and I was really nervous about it. And that part was fine. But literally, I think probably 5 or 6 times within that conversation, this is supposed to be one of the best OBGYNs in our area, "Well, you really should get on birth control." Or, "Well, I know you say you don't want kids, but like you might one day and you might want to change your mind, and birth control is the only thing that can help that." Or, "Are you sure? Like we could look at spironolactone, but that's just not going to be as effective." Luckily, I had done the work to get safely off birth control and was working on my fitness and my own health. So I had a little more knowledge going into that second appointment. But it enrages me because it is so common in these doctors' offices and in these situations for doctors to just push like, "Oh, you have all these problems, you have all these symptoms, birth control, that will solve all your problems." And you're totally right. It literally is a band-aid. It masks it. It's a fake period. Like, and for people who don't know, like I didn't know, I had no idea, or like in your own story, you had no idea. Like it's mind blowing to me. It gets me so fired up.
It's one of those things where I always tell people, like, I'm not anti birth control, I'm anti non informed consent. Like, I
Right.
think that if you know how it works and you know these facts about your body and you also know your options, I think that's the other thing too of like we touched on, it's not gonna fix your heavy or irregular periods. It's not gonna fix your PCOS. It's not gonna fix your acne. But we're told these things because it's how it works in our conventional medical system. And also knowing if you truly want it for pregnancy prevention, there are other options, right? I think that's something that women should be taught. Like, call me woo woo, but like that's something that should be taught in health class of like knowing your own body, of like tracking your temperature and your cervical mucus. I didn't know any of that until I was deep in the research of all this. And I was like, that's so cool because you can be so in tune with your body and it's just as effective as birth control, but without the side effects. And it makes you more in tune with what your body is telling you.
Yeah, it's actually so crazy how many different ways you can know your own body, know your own self. And it's mind-blowing to me that these aren't methods that are taught traditionally, like you said, in schools, in health classes. I feel like people get so awkward around those conversations, particularly when it does come to this idea of like sex and how to do it safely, that instead of focusing on like, okay, here are all the options, here's all the research, they don't know how to have that conversation. So they get like scared and they're like, okay, birth control, like just don't have sex till you're married, like call it a day. And it's doing a disservice to so many girls right now.
I think it's even more sad that women are just put on it for even reasons other than pregnancy prevention. And then they're stuck between this rock and this hard space of like, okay, I want to come off, whether it's to have kids or they just are learning more about the negative side effects of it or connecting the dots of, oh, maybe I'm really, really anxious because I've been on birth control for 10 years. And there's research showing that you're 80% more likely to be prescribed an antidepressant if you've been on birth control, particularly if it was between the years of 15 and 18. So think about
Wow.
that with like the numbers of like over 50%. Um, so anyways, like making those connections, but then they're like, but if I come off, then I'm going to have really horrible periods again where I have to like miss work and, cancel plans. And I'm bleeding through all these tampons every single hour and just feeling really lost in that. So that's where I'm really passionate about like, well, let's do the functional testing and let's get to the root of like, why were you having that? Because that imbalance is still there. And let's fix that so then you can come off and have normal periods that don't take over your entire life 2 weeks out of the month.
Well, and, just on that topic too, it's crazy to me when you look at things like PCOS, when you look at things like endometriosis. I've had friends, like I said, I had type 2 diabetes, reversed it, and still had the PCOS symptoms and continue to have PCOS symptoms. I have friends that have had horrible endometriosis, but you literally have to fight for your life to get a diagnosis for something like endo or for PCOS because there's no known cure for it. And doctors will tell you, oh, the only cure for that is birth control. That's not a cure.
Mm.
It masks symptoms and it just gets me so riled up. So for women who are listening to this, who are like, oh, wow, some of these things that Taylor, you're talking about, that sounds like me, and they're scared to stop birth control because it feels like maybe losing that control or losing that routine. What's one piece of radical honesty you wish somebody had told you maybe before you started?
I think knowing that you have to identify the root cause, and that's truly where the functional lab tests that I run come into play. So my whole thing is test versus guess. So if you have the right labs, and I will say, like, I'm sure a lot of women listening to this, they've had a lot of labs run. They've probably worked with lots of providers, maybe even like functional naturopaths, things like that. The labs I run are so, so different than what most doctors run. And I'm looking at things from a what's optimal for women's health versus typically they're looking at what's normal, but my criteria is much more narrow. So for example, what's normal for TSH, which is a thyroid lab, is anywhere from I think even like 0 to 4 or something like that versus mine is what's optimal for women's health. It's zero point 0.8 to 1. So
Mm.
finding the right provider who offers the right tests has a holistic perspective. So I look at gut health, I look at detox, I look at minerals, all these different things, as well as having someone with the right lens looking at your labs. And then once you have that data, it's so helpful because then you realize it's not all in your head. There's a solution. And I'm very nutrition based. It's like making sure we're eating enough, focusing on foundations, stress, targeted nutrition and supplements, all those things. And so it really is more in your control. So if you're scared to give up birth control because of that perceived like what if lack of control or that fear, getting these functional tests done ahead of time is helpful because then you have that data and you know exactly, you have a step-by-step plan that's tailored to your body versus something that's from like chat GPT or a freebie from Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah, and I've seen this so much in my own journey, and I've seen it in the journeys of a lot of other women I've worked with. I think so many times we look at these things, we push it away, particularly those of us who are scared of doctors because it feels intimidating. It's, oh, I have to get this test done. Or I know a fear for myself that I've had to kind of push through to get actual answers for my own health is what if there is something wrong with me? And like,
Mm.
that sounds crazy because the question that you're actively trying to find the answer to is what is going on. And we get so scared, we get so intimidated. We see the like, okay, you have to take this supplement and do this nutrition and do this workout in the gym. And if you're getting the wrong advice from the wrong person, like then you're having to start all over. And I think this is why the birth control issue is such an issue, is it tries to make health one size fits all, whereas it's not. Something I've had to push through and really learn that, yes, it does seem intimidating in the beginning to get all these labs, to advocate for yourself, to have those conversations, to do all of that work. But once you find the answer and once you know your own body and once you're like, okay, this is what is actually going on and you have those answers, everything becomes a lot less intimidating because it's personalized to you and your own body.
And that's why I have the ability to order those labs. And so I'm like a one-stop shop. So if you've had negative experiences with a doctor, I can assure you that that's not what it's like working with me. It's so nice. I've had so many women who were drawn to working with me because I've been through it myself. I'm sure you're the same way. With your story, people can relate to you. And that's something I said in my own podcast recently. I strive to be different from the other providers that failed me in the past. Like that's really, really important to me. So, you're getting the functional labs, you're getting all the cool data and the step-by-step plan. And you're also getting a real human who has walked the same path, has actual empathy, really cares about your results and wants you to feel better because I've been there and I know how hard it is. It's tough.
I love that you shared that because something I'm very passionate about is your story matters and it has purpose and value and meaning, and you never know who you're going to impact by sharing it. So I think it's
Yes.
really cool that you want to sit with people in the middle of that journey and like be there with them. And I think that that's what makes all the difference, right? Because so many people's issue when it does come to these things is, what if they don't see me? What if they don't hear me? How would you encourage somebody who's scared to advocate for themselves, whether it's in the doctor's office, whether it's with you? What's that first step?
Good question. I think the first step would be like confidence in yourself, whether it's listening to me say, like, if your body is not feeling right, if you don't feel like yourself, if you're having any symptoms, just because a symptom is normal or just because it's common doesn't make it normal. So, having confidence that you deserve to feel good, you don't deserve to feel like absolute crap all the time. And then I honestly think, depending on how comfortable you feel like with this, is finding some data to back it up. And also, if you don't feel heard or seen by your provider, you have the right to fire them. That's something
Mm.
that I always tell people. And my podcast that went out today is about how I fired my doctor when I felt unsupported and I found someone else who would listen.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That sounds like an episode I absolutely need to listen to. Waste.
I think the first step is acknowledging that it's not normal to feel like that. And I think, unfortunately, as women, it's very common to connect and bond over how shitty we feel.
Mhm.
So it's very common to be like, oh, it's my time in the month. Like, I'm just so bloated and, like just eating all the brownies and blah, blah, blah. And so I think we like connect on that. I have a client who is such an advocate after working with me. She's like, you are changing women's lives. Like, you've been so helpful in my journey. And so it's so cute. Like, she goes to other pages that she follows and like comments when they are talking about this. And there's one influencer that she follows who every month talks about how 2 weeks out of the month she has bad PMS and anxiety and, her luteal phase is horrible and her period's horrible. And she'll be in the comments being like, hey, I know this girl who can help you. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. And I think just spreading awareness, if you recognize you do that, maybe that's something you can try and stop doing, because you're kind of like feeding that cycle of like, well, this is just part of being a woman and normalizing it when in reality, like it's not. So stopping getting in that cycle, but realizing there is something you can do.
Actually love what you said a little earlier too about normal versus optimal, but also ask yourself like, hey, what steps are you taking? What research are you doing? Who have you talked to? How are you making yourself more aware? And if you're not taking those steps, like the only way to get better is to start seeking those answers. The only way to find a solution is to take a step. And you can't continue to live this idea that your suffering is normal. We only have one life. So I get that it can be scary or intimidating or fill in the blank, but why make it harder for yourself to just do basic functions of like living?
Yeah. And that's where, whether it's listening to this podcast or getting one of those book recommendations or whatever the case is, like doing something, and you can do it even if you don't want to invest in coaching, or even if you're at a place where you're still skeptical, just learning about it, following someone on Instagram, like those types of things can be really helpful just to learn more and then build that confidence. I think that goes to the previous question of like confidence and advocating for yourself is like educating yourself and making those steps.
How do you think women could find support and not feel isolated while doing this work? How do we find support and encouragement and wellness with one another? How do we hold each other accountable in that?
I think sharing resources is really helpful because, again, this is just not widely known knowledge. I believe our conventional healthcare system is failing women in certain regards. It's great in others, but women's health, not so much. And sharing information, whether it's this podcast, whether it's a book, or even just letting people know, hey, I listened to this and I learned that you're not actually having a period on birth control. That can be really, really empowering and plant that seed. And then someone else will plant it somewhere else. And it'll keep growing until there's even more information out there and more awareness. Because I even see that younger generations are more aware of the negative side effects of birth control and they're choosing and seeking alternative options. And moms are more aware of it too. And so I think the more that we can just talk about how our previous route that we went with, like, oh, just take birth control, isn't actually solving the problem, and recognizing that these symptoms that we're having aren't normal, then that can be a really great way to empower one another.
Yeah, I love that. I always talk about actively listening and genuinely being there for one another. And I do think there's a time and a place for that commiseration. There's also a time and a place to be curious. If you're talking to me, Taylor, and you're like going through it as your friend, my goal would be to be curious, to ask you those questions, to ask you, well, have you done this research? Have you heard about this? And if I have that knowledge, I want to share it because I want to help. So to genuinely be curious and ask those questions and sit with people, I think is such an incredibly powerful thing. It makes them feel less alone and less intimidated because we're changing the script and we're talking about what we can do about how we can support our own bodies versus talking about why everything sucks about them. And I mean, it's hard. Being a woman and navigating women's health, it's really hard and it can be very intimidating. But the more that we can talk about it and be open about it and ask those questions and be that support for one another, the more answers we can actually find.
Yeah. And I think one more thing I'll add too is also, by investing in your health, you're investing in the health of others, right? Like so often I see this a lot with moms where they're like, "Oh, well, I can't afford XYZ because I put it all towards my kids." And it's like flipping the script of thinking, it's kind of like put your oxygen on before you put someone else's on. If the plane's going down, it's the same thing. Taking care of yourself, that's not just making you feel better, it's going to have a ripple effect on everyone else you come in contact with.
I do think so much of it is that confidence mentality. And I also think it translates into our stories, which is the thing that I'm so passionate about. How would you say women can begin to own their story when it does come to their cycles, their symptoms, their health, especially after years of being told not to talk about them or that there is a one size fits all option?
I think standing true to yourself, knowing that that's not something that you have to deal with any longer, and really going off of everything we said, like learning more, talking to other women, realizing it's not just a you thing, finding a provider that listens to you and will help you feel better. I'm a big fan of the testing. So finding someone who does the testing to really uncover those deeper layers because it's likely not one thing. That's why there's no magic bullet. And also not falling victim to like trendy TikTok things or supplements, like randomly doing supplements. I think that's important too, because there's lots of misinformation. And I don't want you to waste your time, your money, or your energy when you could invest in something that's actually going to move the needle that's personalized to you.
That is a whole other soapbox that I could get on about third party testing and supplements and making sure that the supplements that you're using are third party tested and these random TikTok fads that are like, you want to grow your ass? Take this gummy. No, no, that like it gets me so wound up again because I feel like there are so many different options, and I'm putting options in quotes here for women's health that people will lean into the fad and they'll lean into the clickbait and they'll lean into this, that, and the other, try to get you to buy their thing when it's so much simpler than the internet is making it out to be. It's so much
Mhm.
more about your own journey and your own personalized stuff. And invest in that rather than investing in random TikTok fads that aren't actually going to do anything.
Yeah, Totally. I mean, it may seem like the cheaper route just to take like that supplement, try that freebie or free meal plan or whatnot, but it's most likely not going to work. Just cold, hard truth right there because it's not personalized to you. And at the same time, all those little things, again, quotes, add up. And so I did a breakdown of it. I was very apprehensive to invest in actually the dietitian that I got trained by functionally to heal my acne because her program was expensive. It was, thousands of dollars. If I would have just invested in that sooner, I ended up spending over $10,000 over the span of 4 years trying to fix my health. And if I would have invested in her program, I would have saved like half of that. Not counting energy and things that insurance covered. It's very important to get the right kind of care. And even if it seems more upfront, it will save you so much in the end.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, I think it comes back to this idea of believing in your own self and believing you're worth that investment in. Like
Mhm.
taking ownership
Totally.
in your own story, owning the things that are wrong with me, quote unquote, are not normal. Just because everybody has them and just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal. I love that you said that. And truly believing that your own story and your own journey is worth listening to, I think that will help people kind of make that change as well. I know you've mentioned that you work with women who really want to feel like themselves again. So, what does that look like to you?
I have the best job because I was actually working on this before we hopped on. I posted my Instagram stories. Two of my women today got their periods back, consistent periods. One of them had stopped birth control over a year ago, and she went 7, 8 months without having a period. She was put on birth control for, I mean, she's like a mini me. She was put on birth control for acne and missing period, came off, her acne came back, her period was MIA again. And so within 2 months of working together, she's had two consistent periods, 30 days apart.
Wow.
And she messaged me today and she was like, just wanted to give you an update on that, like super excited. So that was really cool. And again, it shows the power of once you have the right plan, your body wants to heal. Your body responds to it. It just needs the right tools. And then the other client who messaged me after, she and I had been proactively prepping to transition off birth control. She's been on birth control for over 2 decades. So she's in her 40s and was put on it at 16. And she came off and she didn't get her period back right away, which is normal. It can take up to 3 months, I say, is like what I typically say is like the max I would want to see before we dig deeper. And with her, I was curious if there might be perimenopause happening. So we were just tracking using the fertility awareness method. She was a little bit stressed about that because she is very type A and wanted it to be like, okay, stop birth control. I get my real period. Everything's great. But it took a little bit longer than she would have liked. And then she, finally got it today. So a little bit less
That's
than three
awesome.
months. And so she did a happy dance on the toilet, she told me. It's been great. But the women I work with are amazing. I'm very grateful every single day I get to wake up and be the person I wish I would have had several years ago, and that there are women out there who are really proactive with their health and seeking answers and wanting to feel their best. And I'm seeing those results every single day with all my clients. I have a very high success rate because of my framework that I use and my signature process.
What did it feel like for you, like when that acne started to go away for you and in your own journey?
My gosh, amazing. I thought I was genuinely when I was in it, I thought I was gonna struggle with acne until menopause, quite honestly, because I had dealt with it. Even on birth control, I had dealt with it. It just was a little bit better, I would say. I'd always dealt with it and always been something I was managing. So when I finally remember like washing my face and being like, oh my gosh, there's like no bumps. And then like that continuously happened week after week after week. And I was like, this is so amazing. It just was huge. And, it's also been a good learning experience for me because I am human and each of us has our own symptom that is the mirror to our health. So for some people, it's GI symptoms. For some people, it's periods. For some people, it's skin conditions. And for me, it's my acne. So whenever there's
Mm.
something going on, it's my cue. And now instead of being like, no, like, I don't know what to do, like freaking out. I think, okay, like, what is my body telling me? So then I run some labs on myself. I dig deeper. I think about how has my stress been? How has my eating been? All that kind of stuff. And I feel even empowered now of, again, having those tools and knowing. So that in and of itself is so great. Just knowing, with healing, there's always going to be ups and downs. It's never going to be perfect, even for myself, who's now an expert in this. Just having the confidence to know how to handle that is so amazing.
It's that shift from being intimidated and overwhelmed to being empowered, to knowing yourself, to knowing your body. I think that's such an incredibly Powerful story. And I truly believe that every woman deserves the right to feel that way, to feel empowered by their own body and to be able to look at their own health and their own signals that their body is giving them and be like, what do I need to pay attention to? What am I missing here? What cue am I missing? For me, it's PCOS chin hairs. That's like my number one. Like, all right, something's up. Like, let's look at that. Let's dive deeper. Like, I can be hitting the gym and eating as healthy as I possibly can, but that doesn't mean that that's what my body needs right in that second. And with PCOS, there are so many different factors and it's always changing and always evolving. That's the thing with women's health is again, it's not a one size fits all. You don't just solve it the first time and then it's like done. This should empower you to pay attention to your own body and then keep asking those questions. Get curious about your own story. So I love that you shared that. What is one boundary or belief you feel like you had to release in your own journey to fully kind of live into that aligned message that you teach today?
I think it's actually that. I think it's to release perfection because I am
Mm,
a self proclaimed like recovering perfectionist. Like, so it makes sense that, going into this healing journey, I would want for it to look perfect. And I recently had this experience where my skin had been really clear for a long period of time. And then I started retinol and my skin did not respond well to it. Some people's do, but mine did not. It wasn't the normal purging. It lasted over 3 months. Like I tried pushing through and I was like, okay, this isn't for my skin. And so I felt like all my progress that I had made over the past year and a half of that internal healing work I did was gone. And it was really frustrating because then you add on top of that, you know, I coach women to heal their acne. And so I felt kind of like, what are people going to think about me if I have my own acne? And I yet again realized that I would rather work with someone who's real about that and openly shares about their healing journey and
yes.
empower them to know that's normal. This is okay. Here's what I'm doing about it versus someone who just like hides behind a filter and pretends everything's fine, doesn't, show up until their skin's like clear again. That was something where for a while, I did that because I was embarrassed. There was some shame around that. Like, shit, like, what if I'm back to square one? And then I realized I'm at a totally different place than I was. This was for sure a skin thing, a topical thing with that retinol. And I'll get back to where I was. And so I shared my journey and I had several clients reach out to me and say, thank you so much for sharing that. And I actually had 2 clients who signed up to work with me after that because they appreciated how human I was and that they could relate to me versus other providers.
That is so beautifully put. And I think it's so true, right? Like there's so much power in showing up as your full self. I like to call it radical honesty, right? Because it is the hard thing to show up in the middle of struggling. It is the hard thing to show up not perfect without the filter, to show up with, hey, I'm going through this today, or hey, I slipped back into where I was, or hey, like I've got this going on. It takes a lot of actual vulnerability to be able to do that. And I talk a lot about how, even as a coach, like it's one thing to talk about and have vulnerability around the things that you've already been through and processed and intellectualized. It's another thing to have the skill set to show up while you're in the middle of going through something and be able to vocalize that and talk about it honestly and not have all the answers. And when I was in therapy, something my therapist would say to me all the time is, Courtney, you have to feel safe to make mistakes. Like you have to create that safety for yourself. I think what you just shared is so powerful because people literally saw that. You were nervous about it. You showed up anyway as your full self. And they said, you know what? This is the kind of person I want to work with because she's transparent, because she's honest, because she believes in herself and knows how to advocate for herself.
Well, thank you. Hopefully empowers other people to do that because I think that's another thing that we can do to empower other women is like taking down this facade of needing to be perfect all the time.
For you, finish this sentence for me. To be nourished to me means blank.
I would say it means nourishing yourself not only physically with food, but also mentally. The type A perfectionists, go getters, women who want to do all the things, and we tend to neglect our mental health. And that is literally the foundation. If we are running on empty, if our nervous system is constantly dysregulated, then we cannot jump to the fancy gut killing protocols. We can't replenish our minerals no matter how healthy we're eating. Or so for me and for a lot of my clients, that looks like taking rest days from the gym, like backing off, taking PTO, taking those sick days, doing nothing on the weekends. And that can be really, really challenging for those of us who that feels unnatural too.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you're speaking directly to me and a couple people I know with that. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So go ahead and let my audience know if they want to connect with you, if they want to work with you, how they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is Instagram. So I'm most active there. I'm sure it will be in the show notes, but it's at Nourished by Tay. And you can DM me, you can message me, no pressure conversation. I'm just happy to chat through if you're experiencing any symptoms, seeing if we're a good fit, talking through things. You do want to work together to get any functional testing, more one on one support, advice, like we talked about in the show. Then I have various ways to work with me, various programs depending on your budget, length of time you're looking to invest. So, really, the best way, again, reaching out to me on Instagram. And then if you go to my website, which will also be in the show notes, you can also schedule a free strategy call with me where we can hop on a completely free call and chat through your symptoms, what your goals are, what you've tried, and determine first if it's a good fit, and then also which program of mine would be the best fit. But with all of my programs, there's 1 to 4 functional labs that I run and can be a DIY program with a functional lab that you get and you take on your own if that's more your style, or it can be where I'm literally holding your hand for over 5 months or about 5 months and we're walking through and evolving your protocols, doing all the lab work. It really just depends on what someone's looking for. And then I am also sharing my free Breakup with Birth Control Masterclass. So if you're newer to this information or just learning, wanting to learn more, that's a really great resource. I take you behind the scenes of what it would be like to work together. I share real life client case studies, go over their labs, go over what we did for them to help them feel better, and really show you that client journey along the way, as well as just preliminary steps you can take if you're thinking about stopping birth control, but you're nervous, or maybe your doctor has told you just stop and see what happens, which is quite literally the worst advice you can have. Take it from me. So that's a completely free resource as well. It's a little bit less than 60 minutes. When you sign up, you get it instantly and you can watch that first. I think that's a good first step.
That is amazing. I am literally going to go watch that right now. Thank you so much
Yay.
for being here and for sharing your story with us, Taylor. I have really appreciated it. And to my audience, have a great week and we will see you next time.